Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. This webinar is being recorded, so everyone who signed up will be able to access the recording by tomorrow. I will be sending it out in a post-event email, and it will be available on the JFF website. So if people are joining late or joining now, don't worry. You'll be able to catch the recording of the whole webinar. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. We're so glad you could join us for this conversation about fertility preservation. Whether you are actively considering it, just starting to explore the idea, or simply gathering information for the future, for yourself or for a loved one. I'm Rebecca. I'm the Atlanta manager at Jewish Fertility Foundation. For those of you who are new to our organization, welcome. We're so glad you found us. At Jewish Fertility Foundation, we provide educational resources and emotional support and other resources to individuals and families navigating all sorts of fertility journeys, including egg freezing. I want to be very clear about our services. All of our educational and emotional support services that we provide, including this webinar, are open to everyone of any religious background or affiliation. If you're here tonight, you belong here. Educational programs like this webinar are one major component of our work. We also offer professionally facilitated support groups, informal opportunities for peer connection, one-on-one peer support, and ongoing resources designed to help people feel informed and supported as they navigate all varieties of fertility journeys. Before we get started with the webinar, I just have a few quick housekeeping notes. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the panel discussion. If you have questions that come up during the discussion, please add your questions to the Q&A chat at any time during the webinar. I will read the questions out loud anonymously at the end for the panelists to answer. This webinar will be recorded, and as I said before, the recording will be emailed to all registered attendees tomorrow and will be uploaded to our website. Now, I'm honored to introduce our moderator for the evening. Sherry Leibovitz is a retired attorney, longtime Atlanta community member who currently serves on the board of Jewish Fertility Foundation, the National Council of Jewish Women of Atlanta, and Jewish Women's Fund of Atlanta, who is generously sponsoring this fantastic webinar tonight. We're so grateful for Sherry's leadership, her commitment to this community, and her commitment to reproductive empowerment for women, and her willingness to guide tonight's conversation. Thank you all again for being here. I'm looking forward to a thoughtful discussion, and I'm going to turn it over to Sherry to get started.
Thanks, Rebecca. This is the very first time I've ever moderated on a Zoom call, on a webinar, so wish me luck. And by the way, as somewhat of a cautionary tale, in terms of my personal journey, I went through menopause at 31. So this technology was not known or available at the time, and you can't turn back the clock. But let me introduce the other really talented members of our panel. Valerie Libby, who, by the way, whose grandfather taught me how to swim on Long Island, New York. Valerie Libby is a board-certified reproductive endocrinologist specializing in fertility preservation and egg freezing, and brings both medical expertise and personal expertise to reproductive planning. Hi, Valerie. Amanda Segal is a fertility industry leader whose work in innovative financial and egg donation programs has helped patients around the world access fertility treatment. Hello, Amanda. And Alex Stewart is known online as Sassy Confetti, is a content creator and style expert who documented her own egg freezing journeys to educate and empower young women. So thank you, panelists, in advance for helping us with this, what I hope will be a very informative webinar. So let's start out really kind of in a 101 framework. Medically, what does a typical egg freezing cycle actually look like from the first consultation through retrieval? And Valerie will get you to kick it off for us.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me on this panel, and thank you, Sherry, for moderating. Yeah, so a typical egg freezing cycle basically You first start with a visit with the physician that will be your physician that will, monitor, decide on your medication dosings and monitor your cycle. So you'll meet with them. They'll discuss with you, everything with regards to your medical background, your medical history, your surgical history, your medications, your allergies, all of those important things. They usually will ask important questions like, are you in a relationship? How many children do you want? Have you ever had your ovarian reserve testing? So like blood tests that will and ultrasounds that tell us sort of where you are on the grand scheme of your egg numbers. And then they'll talk to you about, the value of egg freezing, and they will, potentially talk to you about your expected outcomes if you have already done your testing. If you have not done your testing, then you will get your testing, and then usually they'll have a follow-up visit to know your expected outcomes of how many eggs they expect per cycle. I usually talk about, my personal experience egg freezing, 5 times, and why I did that and the benefit of that, and then also just the whole process. So it's a 2-week process. You usually, will often start with, believe it or not, birth control for a couple of weeks to, kind of prime your ovaries. Sometimes not though. And then you'll do 2 weeks of injections every night, in the belly. And you're just injecting yourself with the same hormones that your brain normally releases to grow 1 egg a month, but at much higher doses. So instead of just 1 egg growing, we're going to try to grow as many as we possibly can that month. Now, these are eggs that would normally have died that day. We're just recruiting them to grow. So you don't go into menopause any sooner. We don't take out eggs you would have needed later on. We're just recruiting eggs to grow that would have died. So you inject yourself every evening for 2 weeks. And every other day during that 2-week period, more or less, you're going to come into our office for ultrasound and blood work, where we'll monitor your response to the medications. We'll see your eggs getting bigger and bigger. And we'll change your doses and titrate them as needed. After about 2 weeks, your follicles, your eggs are going to be so big. The follicles, I'm sorry, are the sacs that hold the eggs inside of your ovary. And so we measure the actual follicle. You can't see the egg because it's microscopic, but your follicles get bigger and bigger. And then after 2 weeks, they're so big that you are ready for your egg retrieval, which means you take one special injection to boost your ovulation. And then 2 days later, you'll come in the morning for your egg retrieval, where you come into our office. We put you to sleep under IV anesthesia typically. And then we put an ultrasound probe in the vagina with a tiny little needle that goes through the vaginal sidewall and into each of your follicles within each ovary. That needle is actually hollow and it's connected to suction tubing. So we suction out the eggs from each of the follicles, put your eggs into a dish in our lab that's connected to our little operating room, look at them under the microscope, assess their maturity level, and then freeze the ones that are mature. And then you typically have a discussion with your physician, to know if you should, if you should consider freezing, again, doing another round. And they will change your doses based on your response. And that's pretty much what the process looks like.
I'm going to ask any of the other panelists to chime in, and then I just have a couple of follow-up questions if you all don't cover that in.
I think
what
I'd
you
like
asked.
to just chime in from the perspective of, you know, this can be so foreign to so many people. This is something that, for us in the industry, it's like a no-brainer. But for folks that, are wary, it sounds intimidating. For you, Valerie, having been through the process yourself as well as being a clinician, it kind of rolls off your tongue. I think for somebody who is kind of young and not sure, there are so many aspects to this process that it definitely can be intimidating. So while Dr. Libby did an incredible job in explaining the process of what it entails to actually go through this, it's kind of that almost that before step is, how do I decide that I even want to do this? And that's something that, we'll talk about more this evening, and we'll kind of give give you that, we want you to be able to walk away from this webinar, whether you are somebody that's young and thinking about doing this, you're single, you really want to, you've heard about it, there's been chatter, girls are talking about it. The amazing Alex Stewart has given us that platform to be educated by sharing her own experience, and Alex will go over that with you as well. But there are also some moms and grandmoms on the webinar tonight that are thinking about, I heard about this. A friend told me I want to educate myself a little bit more so that I can feel empowered to potentially help my daughter or granddaughter, because we'll go over, and when it's my turn to kind of go through this, it's not an inexpensive process. It is, there's a financial implication to it. So again, while I think that Dr. Libby gave us such an amazing kind of quick overview as to what the medical process entails, we do have to remember that this is something that is still not mainstream. And what we're trying to do this evening is give you the opportunity to empower you, to learn, to educate yourself, to understand, so that you can walk away and say, wow, this is something I need to be thinking about. Why have I not thought about it before? So that was kind of my 2 cents in kind of.
Alex, before I get you to pipe in, I want to ask a question, because this notion of getting tested, and maybe some people have gotten tested before they have that first consultation or not. And Amanda, when you talk in terms of maybe grandparents listening, and we have a range of ages listening in on this, and that may listen in on the future. So on the younger side, is it possible, do some people test early? What's early? In their early 20s, I'm just going to throw that out. Find that they have a very significant amount of eggs and say, you know what, this is something that I want to do in the next 3, 4, 5 years. But now that I have that information, which is good information, I may want to wait. Or do they usually one right after the other?
I think that that's an outstanding starting point. And I think that Dr. Libby can certainly answer it from a technical perspective better than I can. I'll just give you from my perspective as a mom of 2 girls who are in their, early 20s and late 20s. What my perception of this is by the time you hit 30, get tested. Unless you know that there is some form of infertility diagnosis prior. Maybe you've been working with your OBGYN, you have endometriosis, you have polycystic ovarian syndrome. There could be, and again, Dr. Libby can give you the medical side of it. But my personal feeling, and having been in the industry for as long as I've been in it, is by 30 you should start getting tested. And not that you, as you said, exactly, Sherry, not that you have to do it at 30, but at least you have that baseline of where you need to be. And I'm going to hand it back to you, Valerie, so you can kind of just justify what I've said.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, Amanda. Everything you said is correct. I do agree that if you haven't been tested by 30, you definitely get tested. And by tested, that means like getting your blood work. It's something called your AMH level, your anti-Mullerian hormone, and your FSH level, follicle stimulating hormone level. And these numbers tell you how close you are to menopause, sort of, and also how many eggs you have, meaning like how well we'll do with an egg freezing cycle. And I've had people with extremely low AMH levels and normal FSH levels. And the AMH truly can scare some people if it's low, but it truly only tells me the starting dose you'll need on medicines, and you'll need a much higher starting dose with a lower AMH. So these are just important numbers to know. And then your follicle count, which is an ultrasound through the vagina, looking at your ovaries and counting the number of eggs we can see. So these are just important numbers. So I definitely agree by 30, unless you have, a family history of something, get it earlier. Personally, I tell people, if you are curious, get tested, because there's another wave coming, and it will happen in the next 20 years or so, that, at this point, insurance, parents, they have insurance for their children until they're 26. So if you can get egg freezing done at 25, your eggs, you're going to have more eggs. You're going to be under your parents' insurance. And a lot of insurances do cover that when you work for a large company. And usually 26-year-olds don't, 27-year-olds don't work for that large of a company, don't have that good of benefits until they're maybe in their 30s, So that's a good time when you're on your parents' insurance to do egg freezing if you can. I know it seems early, but and I don't think the world is fully ready for, early 20s egg freezing, but if you're questioning, if you're wondering, just get tested and just to have a baseline and kind of follow that with your doctor. Now, do OBGYNs encourage women to get tested in their early 20s? No. Do they encourage women to get tested in their 30s? Often not, honestly. Exactly, Alex. Yeah, I want to hear your story too. So
Yeah.
it's a bummer, and that's why we're here. And Alex has a great platform on social media, to kind of tell you the importance of telling your friends and of getting yourself tested. Because like Sherry mentioned, she went through menopause at 31, and this can happen. And it happens to many people, many close family of mine that this happened to. So, it happens to a lot of women. And so I would just encourage you to get tested. It doesn't hurt. So Alex, tell us your story.
No, I think you're saying exactly what I kind of went through. Like I was in my 30s. No one ever said anything to me. I had to bring it up to my doctor. So I think it's just, even though it is more common now, I think it's something that we have to take control of. Even though it is more common to take control of like your own future, ask your doctor to do the testing. It would be my recommendation if they haven't brought it up to you already.
So, Alex, I want you to say more. So I'm going to frame it this way. From a day-to-day standpoint, what surprised you about the logistics of going through this procedure, the schedule, how you worked it in with your work schedule, juggling work life? What should people plan for?
Yeah, so when I turned 34 is when I did my first round of egg freezing. I did it twice. And I kind of went in zero knowledge, zero expectations too. I just sort of like knew it's something that I wanted to do. And I think I was surprised at how fast it all went. Um, like when your body's ready, it's ready. And so it's kind of like everything goes like really, really fast and it can be a little scary. So the second time I felt like, oh, I got this. Like I know exactly what I'm doing. But that, your body surprises you. So it's not the same every time. I think the biggest stuff that I was surprised about was how often I had to go in to get blood work and check on my follicles. I didn't realize it would be so time consuming. That's not to say that like my nurses and my doctors were very great about like what worked for my schedule. So like, yes, I had to come in every other day for testing, but we would do it around my work schedule, which was really great. My nurses came in at like 4 a.m. so that people could come in and get tested, like they were so great. And I think also, I thought I would be able to keep my normal pace of like go, go, go going. Um, that is not a thing. And I think you just have to plan for that. I'm someone who's like at a concert one night and at a dinner the other, and all the, like all these things. I just was so lethargic my second round really, really badly. I just did not want to, I just felt gross. So I think you kind of have to realize that you have to slow down for this process. I mean, it is like basically the process of pregnancy. So you have to like really treat yourself like you're going through that process. Like I was doing prenatal vitamins and getting acupuncture and all this stuff that like I didn't really think I would have to do because like I'm not trying to get pregnant, but it is part of the process. And I think like people don't realize that either. And part of that is hormones. Like you are pretty emotional. And I was doing this alone. I don't have a partner. Part of the reason why I'm freezing my eggs. And that felt lonely. So I think knowing what I know now, I would recommend having a plan in place of like having people check on you. I had a friend who sent me a care package and it made me sob So, it's like those little, I'm like thinking about it now, it's making me teary-eyed. But, like things like that, I think you have to like think of um having those plans in place as you go through this. And I wish I had known, but I'm like glad that people are talking about it a lot more. I mean, this was 7 or 8 years ago that I did it, and people weren't really talking about it back then. And so I'm glad people are now because that you need to have the same support going through this process as you do any other like big life event.
I think you hit such a valid point there, Alex, in that there is no shame. On the contrary, I think that initially people think of it, oh my God, I'm gonna have, I'm not in a relationship and therefore I'm freezing my eggs, and there's almost like this sense of shame.
Hmm.
Absolutely not. That needs to just get tossed out of the window. This is empowerment. This is just you taking charge of yourself, of your future, of creating your life the way you want it to be, and not feel like you kind of, have like this noose around your neck telling you have to have a baby now.
Hmm.
And that's what I love about it. So, and Valerie, I apologize if I missed you saying this, but one of the reasons we're encouraging you to freeze your eggs younger is because your eggs are healthy younger. So, that's the whole basis of it all, is that we want you to have this insurance policy. It's kind of like I told this, and again, talk about it a little bit more in the financial side of it, but it's that you're giving yourself an insurance policy the same way as you are going to buy insurance on your car that you drive every day, and you hope to God you never have an accident. It is exactly the same thing. You're not freezing your eggs to use your eggs necessarily. What you're doing is you're freezing your eggs to allow yourself that opportunity should you choose to have a child and you are now in your 40s and your eggs are not as viable as you were in your 30s, that you have those eggs to use. And so you, Alex, being able to voice that ability to share it with people, share it with your friends, you will be shocked as to how many of your friends are doing it too.
Hmm.
And they're not talking about it because they don't think that you're doing, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's like, it's this level of just get out there and talk about it. And that will give you that comfort once you're going through it as well, where you can even maybe sync it
So
up with a
Amanda,
friend.
Amanda, I want you to talk about the costs.
Yeah.
Separate though, if you will, because it's something that I look back on my own history and I think about how easy it would have been for the doctor to have tested me. It's like I said
Look,
to him at
so
one
I think
time in a not
look,
very
it's a
friendly
great,
way. It's
it's a
not like it's not like it's a spinal tap, for goodness sakes. So I would like you, in addition to answering the question about the total cost, how much does it cost to get tested for the blood work that you
great,
need for
great
that?
question. Great question. And the truth of that is, as Valerie said, is that a lot of the times your insurance will actually cover your testing. So if you don't specifically have coverage for the egg freezing process, you could potentially have coverage because it's just baseline. As Dr. Libby said, you're looking at your AMH, your FSH, your antral follicle count. Those are baseline blood tests and a sonogram. So very often those will be covered under your basic insurance plan. It's kind of like when you go to your OBGYN and you just say, I want to test, I want my day 3 ovarian reserve tested. And I mean, am I right in saying, Alex, do you remember if you got coverage for your testing?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did.
And from my recollection, that is typically what happens. So the testing can range between about $350 and $600. But again, hopefully it's just a co-payment. No medication is needed. So you're not having any cost of medication. It is literally you getting your period. If you're on the pill or you have an IUD, your nurse coordinator will explain to you when that testing is relevant to do, or your physician. But a lot of the time you haven't even really even seen the physician yet. You're kind of just getting your testing done through your OBGYN before you actually potentially will go on to a fertility specialist to
Mhm.
do this. So that's kind of what you're looking at from the testing perspective. Non-invasive, easy, one day, really an easy process. Then we get into, okay, now I've made this decision and
Can
I
I just
want to
say
act.
one thing about
Yes, of
testing?
course.
Yeah, so at my clinic, Shady Grove Fertility, which they're all over the country, but there's also I think other clinics probably do this similarly. But if you call to make an appointment about for egg freezing, they before you see the doctor, they will schedule all of your baseline testing so that when you do meet with the doctor, they can do
Yes.
a full egg freezing consult so you understand, your chances of success. And so, if you can get that done prior to your visit, that is helpful. Yeah, sorry. Keep.
No, that's a very valid point. And I actually forgot that SGF do that. So that is definitely a good something to ask, beforehand, so that at least when you're meeting with the physician, you have something and not having to then go back and get it tested. So great point. All right. So now folks are deciding, okay, this all sounds great and I really want to do this. What is this going to cost me? So you really are looking at a single cycle of egg freezing being anywhere between about $9,000 and $11,000. And that would depend, of course, on the clinic that you're going to and what different financial programs they offer you. But that's what you're looking at. And you think, okay, well, that's not so bad. I can probably kind of scrape that together. I can afford that. On top of your egg freezing, there are additional costs that are associated with it. And this is where it kind of gets tricky. So medication actually almost doubles your cost of what you're looking at for an egg freezing cycle. Now, it does entirely depend on your ovarian reserve. So as Dr. Libby said, when you're getting those the testing done, we're kind of determining what your AMH looks like in order to know how much medication we're going to be giving you. Medication can run anywhere from about $4,000 to about $12,000. So it really does there's a huge, variation there. And that is because depending on how much you're going to need in order to get you stimulated to the right amount of eggs we want to see in one cycle. So the cost can be, somewhat intimidating. And this is where, I'm such a big advocate in using your resources. So what are your resources? Well, your first resource is obviously your insurance company. Find out. More and more companies are starting to do egg freezing. It is no longer deemed experimental. It was in the past. Now we're looking at it being more mainstream. So there are insurance companies. A lot of companies offer riders to their insurance policies that actually cover fertility treatment. One that is very prominent and lots of folks have is called Carrot. So Carrot Fertility actually has an addendum to one's insurance policy that different companies will offer you in order to cover specifically fertility treatment. So that would be the next thing that you would do. I apologize. We were on Do Not Disturb. I'm not sure what happened there. So that's what you're kind of looking at from insurance. And then you have your parents. And if there are parents on this webinar, this is where you come into it. I know we said this was open for everybody, but I know as a Jewish mother myself, all we want is to have Jewish grandbabies. And it's nice to know that we have that reserve for our children back there. So for me, the biggest gift I can give my girls is the ability to be able to freeze their eggs and know that that is something that there is no pressure for them in the future because they have those eggs frozen, they're kind of, stacked away, and hopefully they don't need them, but if they do, there they are. So that's something that I think is really what we're trying to educate everybody about. And it's not one, as a young girl, we don't expect you to have $20,000 sitting around that you're able to use for an egg freezing cycle. We recognize that. So that's where your resources become so valuable. With that being said, there are different financial options that different programs offer. One of the things that I absolutely loved about SGF, and to be honest with you, that was my experience. I was there for 30 years, and that was kind of what I did. I'm sure there are other programs out there. So if you're all over the country, find out. Sorry, you're on mute, Sherry. You're on mute.
I said that's Shady Grove. I just
Yes, Shady Grove Fertility. Yes, yes. Sorry, yes. So, but what we offer is something called an Assure plan, where we allow patients to actually go through the process, either having and again, Dr. Libby can give you the reasoning behind this, but we either want to see you storing 20 eggs if you're under 35 or under, or 30 eggs kind of between 35 and 40. And what we offer you is a fixed fee to be able to do that, where you either get to that 20 or 30 eggs, or you get up to 4 egg freezing cycles. So you pay a premium if you are doing just one, if you end up just doing one cycle and getting your full 20 eggs. You'll pay a little bit more than you would have if you were just paying for one single cycle. But if you don't get those 20 eggs, you're actually able to do a second cycle at no additional cost. You've paid that fee up front. And that gives you that financial safety net to fall into if you have to do it multiple times. Not everybody, believe you me, not everybody, even under 35, are going to produce those 20 eggs in that first cycle. And again, probably you, Dr. Libby, can give the technical side of it. I mean, what would we typically see, a 35-year-old producing? Anywhere from what?
I mean, there's a huge range, but I would say on average, probably like 5 to 12
Yeah. So
eggs per cycle.
So that
Yeah.
gives you a good understanding as to why this program really makes sense, because it does give you that kind of worry-free notion of, I know what I've paid for it up front, I've gotten a loan, or I've had my parents help me towards that, or my insurance. Now, if you have insurance, then the Assure plan wouldn't be an option for you because you have the insurance to cover you. This would be purely for those folks that do not have any financial coverage.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to piggyback on that, that's the Assure program, and it's called Assure 20 or Assure 30. So we assure that you'll get 20 eggs or 4 egg retrievals, or 30 eggs and 5 egg retrievals, like Amanda said, for a premium. But it is an incredible program because like Amanda said, you want to get between, at least 20 or 30 eggs, ideally. And you could get 19 the first cycle, and you still can do another cycle because you get 20. So you're gonna have probably more than 20 and more than 30. And these are amazing, amazing programs. So yes, I agree.
That's really an interesting aspect of this, and a good one to know about. So we've talked about the egg retrieval, the cost. Let's talk about the next step, which is the freezing, the cost associated with it, the consent forms, the legalities, timing, etc. Amanda, talk about the cost first, and then Valerie, let's talk about the, consent forms, and both of you can talk about, and Alex, talk about your experience on the freezing side.
So typically the storage of the eggs is an additional cost as well. So even if you're doing your Assure plan, that typically is excluded. You're looking at it being about $80 per month to keep your eggs stored. I'm horrible at math. What would that be a year? Oh my goodness.
I pay
80
like
times 4.
600 if that
Yeah,
helps.
about 600 or so
Yeah.
a year to keep them stored. Again, best insurance policy you've got out there. They're stored, they're safe, and that's really it that you're looking at as far as keeping those eggs stored. Those eggs can be stored indefinitely. So there is really no time frame on how long those eggs can be stored. And it's kind of,
And typically they're stored through the fertility clinic that you're working with.
yes. Am I?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the clinic. We store on site in our own clinic, but there are lots of fertility clinics that ship the eggs, especially if you're doing something like long-term storage, which egg freezing would be. If it's going to be there for more than a year, they'll often ship it to like a storage facility that a lot of different clinics will ship their eggs and embryos and, gametes to. And so you want to clarify that with the clinic that you're interested in using, just like where do you store your eggs and embryos? Um, but yeah, I mean that they can store it in different places.
So kind of just to run it through, so you have kind of a nice overview. You have your cost of your egg freezing. You have your cost of the cryopreservation, so that's included in that whole monitoring. So when I say, let me actually backtrack a little bit. So Dr. Libby gave you kind of an overview of what you're doing over those 2 weeks. Every day you go, not every day, but initially it's probably every third day, fourth day, and then closer to when those follicles are ready to, those eggs are ready, you're coming in more frequently. But all that is included in that price. So your daily monitoring, your ultrasounds and your blood work would be included in that price. Your actual egg collection, so the retrieval of the eggs would be included in that. The cryopreservation of the eggs would be included in that. What is excluded are three factors. One, your anesthesia. So if you are you are put out, so it's called twilight anesthesia. You're not under general anesthesia. You're under enough to not really remember anything and maybe tell a good story or two. From what I've heard from physicians is kind of that happy feeling. But it's nice enough to know that you don't feel anything when the physician is going in and retrieving those eggs. So the anesthesia typically is an additional cost that would be charged by an anesthesiologist. And I do not know a cost of that. I mean, you would have to find that out directly from the individual clinic that you're working with. Your medication, as we explained, that is, a significant part of this process. And a lot of people don't know that going into it. So again, we're trying to educate you and empower you to have that knowledge going in. Anywhere from about 4,000 to 8,000. I think I said 12 earlier. I think that's a high number, but typically between $4,000 to $8,000, I would imagine the medication to be. And then should you choose to come back down the road to actually use those eggs, at that point, you would be responsible for the cost of thawing the eggs, fertilizing the eggs, and then obviously having the eggs transferred back in. And again, depending on the clinic, I know Shady Grove Fertility does have a wonderful program that kind of, again, wraps everything up really nicely and gives you a flat fee to be able to do that. But those are the costs that you would have to incur down the road if you end up choosing to use those eggs that you have frozen. So those are
Usually
your
by that time you have a partner that will help you with that cost, or
financially, yes.
you are more financially secure too. But yeah, I would say medications are typically like 5,000, 5 to 6,000. But Alex, what about you? What was your experience with costs?
Yeah, mine was I think six
Okay.
for my meds, and I was 34 the first time, 36 the second time. So I think, I was in the older age range of, I mean, I know you can do it way later, but I think we were trying to amp it up a little bit,
Yeah.
um, hormone wise. But yeah, I
Yes.
think it was surprising. I think you don't know going in that there's separate costs, and that the big bulk of the cost is really the medication. So, and there are my clinic that I worked with had a lot of like there were ways to like talk to insurance companies about getting help with those things. So there's other stuff on top of, like ways to help with just the medication, which I think is great.
Hmm. Yeah.
So is it fair to say, Alex, with what you just said, that you should look at your fertility clinic as your partner, talk to them about the kind of insurance you have, and see if they have any ideas of the kinds of questions that you
Yeah.
should ask, and
I mean, I
right?
personally think
Yeah.
it's very important to shop around for your fertility clinic. I think a lot of friends that I know who have done this kind of went with the first person they talked to. And I hated my first experience that I had. The doctors were not great. I was like, this is very clinical, and I didn't feel supported like in any way. And the second place I went to, I was like, oh, this feels like a hug. And I think it should feel that way. Like it shouldn't feel like you're being pushed around in a cattle like call, if that's what the first time felt like. So the second time they helped me with everything. I mean, I had a one-on-one with the nurse to talk about injections and how to do that. Like my friends of mine have not had that experience. They've had webinars that they have to join, where they're on with like 20 other girls going through this whole process. I think for me it was very important that there was a personal hand holding aspect to it, because I was scared. Like this is not something that I had ever gone through before. I didn't have a partner. So I think shopping around was really important to me. And I think you have to feel really comfortable when you do this whole process. Everything that Valerie has said about Shady Grove sounds like the exact experience that I had, though. So that sounds
Yeah,
fabulous.
Valerie, I would just ask, is there anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I want to add something
Emotional
that
side, what you've seen.
yes. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Definitely. But I also want to add before we get more into this, something that's really important, is, and Amanda kind of touched on it, but like we're born with all the eggs that we're ever going to have. And every day we lose 20 to 30 eggs a day. They just get reabsorbed by our body. So we're born, when we're growing inside of our mom's belly, we have 6 million eggs. By the time we're born, we have 1 million. By the time we have our first period, we have 400,000. And by the time we have menopause, we have 1,000. So every day we're losing eggs. And not only do we lose eggs every day, but the quality of our eggs decreases as well. So once we hit 35, the egg number decreases, significantly. And before 35, our eggs are considered to be, or before, when we're in our 20s, our eggs are considered to be good quality or smart eggs. And when an egg and a sperm get together to create an embryo, the embryo divides. And at every division, there's always problems or errors that occur. But our young, smart, healthy eggs can correct the errors and result in healthy babies. After 35, though, our eggs aren't that smart. They can't correct the errors, and they result more often in babies that have chromosomal abnormalities like Down syndrome, trisomy 21, which usually end in miscarriage. So that's why as we get older, it's harder to get pregnant because we have fewer eggs, but also the quality isn't as good, so we'll have more miscarriages. So that is also why it's really important to freeze early, not only because you'll have higher egg numbers, so you'll get to use less, you'll get more eggs out from the egg retrieval, and you'll have to use less medicines, but also because the egg quality is just so much better. The emotional process, I would say it's very different for everybody. I personally, it's a lot. I mean, even for a doctor that has studied this, like to learn about the injections, that was so difficult for me. I mean, even on my sixth like round of IVF or egg freezing, I still had to like watch my videos and like remember like how to mix all these medicines. I mean, it's a lot, okay? Um, I have egg freezing, I have medication videos out there. I'm sure you do too, Alex, and like lots of great pharmaceutical companies do, but it is a lot. Emotionally, I I was a fertility doctor, so I was in residency. Like I had friends around me that were comfortable talking about it. We were studying together about this, so I didn't feel that alone, but I know it can be incredibly lonely because like Alex said, a lot of people don't want to talk about it. So definitely, you're going to need someone to drive you there, right? Because you're going to have been under anesthesia. So I usually had my mom or my boyfriends, whoever was in my life at the time. And so that person will be your support person throughout the process as well, I would imagine. Like, if you can't, it is important, it is helpful to have, support systems there. And know that you're not alone, and your clinic is your support system, and your nurses, and online, Alex and I and everyone, we are here. You can search the hashtags of egg freezing. There's so many women that go through this and just like learn that you're not alone. But yeah, for me, it was okay emotionally. Some women have, different experiences with the change in hormones, so everybody is different. And I generally say typically, it's a lot worse online than it actually will be for you, because a lot of people talk about their bad experiences with hormones, but I was totally fine, each time. So, I think that just know it's probably you're reading the worst, and you're probably going to be okay. And I still dated, I went on dates when I was, going in the evenings, and it was a lot. I probably wasn't as busy as you, Alex, but I was in residency a lot of the time or in fellowship, and I'd have to do overnight shifts, and in the morning I'd go in for monitoring. And like you said, Alex, they'll work around your schedule, to go early in the morning. Um, you know, and you make it work, and you plan ahead, but it's definitely worth it. And you feel a huge weight lifted off your shoulders, because, and I always tell my patients this, I think this is really important too. And I say, if you were to meet the right guy tomorrow, Alex, how long do you think it would take you until you guys got engaged?
Like a year,
A year. And then how long of engagement until you guys got married?
another year,
Another year, 2 years. And then how long of marriage until you're ready to start having a child?
right? Like
Maybe right away. I don't,
two.
maybe 2 years. That's 4 years. And
Hmm.
let's just say you're 38, okay? That makes you 42, So now, instead of feeling like a 38-year-old dating, you can feel more like a 34-year-old. You've gained back that time of your dating life. And so I truly, think that there's just the second you wake up from anesthesia and your doctor tells you that you have more than one egg frozen, just a weight lifted off your shoulders, and you don't have to feel that pressure of the biological clock ticking. And so I just feel like that's really important, as well. Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
So Amanda and Valerie, a follow-up, something that came actually up in the chat, but I think it follows from what we've been talking about. There's a lot of information out there, as you said, online. Rebecca's going to put some resources in the chat. But as you said, sometimes we read the worst online. So one of the questions in the chat was, what kind of side effects do you see from the medication? What can go wrong from going through this process?
So these are natural hormones that your body secretes every single day of the month. Okay. So they're just at higher doses. So if you're living your life without, reactions, without like constant allergic reactions, you're probably going to be okay physically. Okay. You're going to feel bloated. You're going to feel like you ate a big burrito. You are, there are always risks doing, egg freezing and IVF. So you have the risk of what's called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, which is extremely rare. But it's where you over respond to medicines, and we watch people very closely for that. We know people that are at high risk for that, and we do a lot of things to prevent that. But most of the time, physically, you're a little bloated, and during that time, you don't want to do exercise or have sex because you could have ovarian torsion. So there's just these risks that they'll go through, and I've never had a patient with ovarian torsion. It's just one of those, very low risk. Um, but physically, you're going to be okay. During the procedure itself, there's always a risk of any surgery of infection, bleeding, pain, injury to the organs nearby. Very low risk because it's a minimally invasive procedure, but that's always something we have to mention. Emotionally, I mean, like I said, I don't, everybody is different, and you could be a little more sensitive. I definitely was physically actually more sensitive to touch. Like when they drew my blood towards the end of the 2 weeks, the estrogen level is very high, so you can experience things like physical sensitivity, but that was my experience. I don't know, Alex, were you
Yeah,
how?
my first time doing it, I felt great.
Mhm.
I felt amazing. And then the second time I did it, I was very emotional. And I felt really like very bloated. Like I was like I felt like I was waddling. And so the second time for me was a lot more difficult, and emotionally I think I was just like, I don't know, I wouldn't say it like wrecked me, but I was definitely more like aware, I think, that I was doing it or something, and it just like made me more emotional in general. So and then afterwards I was pretty dizzy for like a week, but I think I wasn't hydrating the right way. So we figured that out. You have
Yeah.
to have a lot of Gatorade and water, not
Yeah.
just one or the other.
I love the
Um,
transparency, Alex. I think that's important for us to recognize that this is a medical procedure.
yeah,
We're empowering ourselves, and I love using that word because that is something that I feel very strongly about. And we're doing something for ourselves. And it is important though to recognize you just being so honest and transparent in that, it's not a fun process, but you get through it, and 2 weeks later it's
yeah.
over,
And I
and you
think
get
it's
on with your life.
interesting that like if you have two different experiences, I mean like mine were so vastly different that I think like you could be totally fine or you could be I mean it could go either way, right? So I think it's kind of the luck of the draw.
Yeah.
Kind
I
of.
also think for me, I mean, I had six retrievals. The sixth was much more emotional too for me. And I think I was older. And I think
Yeah.
even though you were 34 and 36, I was 36 with my last one too. And I think that just there's just more, you just feel like there's more weight on it,
Yeah.
And when
Mhm.
you know you're not doing as well as you wanted to do, I think that's really hard. So I think just setting expectations that are really realistic.
Yeah.
I always tell my patients, like the night before your egg retrieval, think to yourself, okay, if I get X number of eggs, I'm going to be okay. And I
Mhm.
always say shoot low. Like
Mhm.
if you're growing 10 eggs, shoot for five, so that you can you don't need to put that burden on yourself. You did a lot of work, and even if you have five eggs, that's still good, and you usually surpass that. But yeah,
I think it was also kind of hard to not have a routine. Like my normal routine kind of got messed up, right? So,
yeah,
like you can't work out, which was something that helped me relieve stress. So,
hmm,
and I'm like a workout, I like classes, which are
yeah,
a def no-no. Like, they were like, okay, you could do like prenatal yoga. And I'm like, no, thank you. So I think it's just like I didn't have my normal things that like could de-stress me like wine and working out. So I think like having things that are within the not the constraints to help you de-stress are important. Like and I think the first time around I also was doing more like I did acupuncture. I did things to de-stress myself and I didn't the second time around because I was sort of like I'm a
I
veteran.
know
I
what I'm
got this.
doing.
Yeah. And I think I didn't do myself a service. Like I was eating better the first time. The second time I didn't eat as clean. I think I was just sort of like, that was BS. I didn't need to do all of that. No, I think you kind of do. So I think it was me
So
the
being
second time.
open-minded, having a plan, and
Yeah,
having a
have a
plan.
plan
So
and stick by it.
makes okay. So I have another question that I've heard different opinions on, so I want to pose it here. Um, Hypothetically, you're in a committed relationship and you decide to embark on this journey. Talk a little bit about egg retrieval, freezing eggs versus going through you're not ready to have kids, right? But you think about fertilizing embryos and freezing the embryos versus eggs. Talk a little bit about that.
yeah. So I've been in many relationships, serious ones that I went through egg freezing because here's the deal. When you fertilize your eggs with sperm, okay, that is legally not yours. So it is you and the other person. So unless it's donor sperm. So basically you cannot unfertilize your eggs, your embryos. Once they're fertilized, and this may be your only chance at having eggs frozen, and things can happen. The divorce rate is high. Relationships come and go. Engagements often don't last. So if you are not 1,000% sure about your significant other, do not fertilize your eggs. Freeze just eggs. It used to be the case
What about the
that
likelihood? What about the safety? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think this is where I was going, but if I don't answer, well, let me know. But it used to be that embryos survived thaws a little bit better than eggs survived the thaw. But now technology has improved so much that they're almost exactly the same. So there's no scientific advantage to freezing embryos over eggs. I would say if you are in a fully, like 1,000%, I don't even like engagement because, like I said, engagements often don't last. But if you are 100,000% sure, usually marriage, if that's your plan, then it's okay. But other than that, like really encourage just freezing your eggs. You can do a round of egg freezing, and then if you really think you're 100,000% sure about this person, you can do then a round of IVF. But I truly think that it's really important to have that for yourself. I mean, I have patients that are married and have and in a wonderful loving relationship, but just the woman like she needs to keep her eggs frozen. So she's going to do another round of IVF and still keep her and they're in a great relationship. They already have a baby together. I mean, and I think that's amazing, just in case like things happen, and it's like the only thing you can truly hold on to
So
is
I'm
are
going to
those
second
eggs.
that. I am absolutely going
Yes.
to second that in that, and I am a glass half full kind of girl. So I'm usually, Valerie may be sounding a little Debbie Downer here on relationship status. I'm going to go the other route where I think that, things can be great, but I still go back to what Valerie has said. I am a strong believer that unless you were married, you freeze your eggs. Now, I think in answer to you, Sherry, I think where you were maybe going as well, the benefit of freezing embryos versus freezing eggs is we know what those eggs are doing. So while the thaw rate is the same, is almost the same between thawing eggs versus thawing embryos, with an embryo, we know whether that embryo has in fact gotten to this blastocyst stage, which is what we ultimately want to see. So if somebody has, and I'll kind of give you just, and again, remember, I'm a layperson, so the doctor will answer if I'm incorrect, but just to kind of give from a layperson, I want you guys to understand, if we have 10 eggs, not every egg is going to fertilize. Not every fertilized egg is going to create an embryo, and not every embryo is going to implant and create a baby. So there is an attrition process, and that's why we want you to freeze 20 or 30 eggs, because we don't expect you to have 20 or 30 babies, but out of those 20 eggs, you will probably only get 3 potential live births. So that's something that a lot of people, the misconception is people understand that, yeah, when you hear freezing embryos is better than freezing eggs, yes, because you know what you've got with an embryo. You don't necessarily know what you're going to get with those eggs. Right? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, yes, pretty much. I mean, yeah, I totally, that's a very important point that we hadn't really touched on was the attrition rate, and why you need so many eggs. I mean, for example, had 40 eggs frozen from 5 egg freezing cycles, and my last cycle was an IVF, so I don't really count that, but 40, and I only created 3 euploid embryos from those. And euploid means genetically tested normal, which you have the option of testing your embryos to see if they're normal. So you really don't, you feel very comfortable with 40 eggs frozen, but when it comes down to it, you might not have any babies from those eggs. So that's the other thing to know when we say insurance policy, because I do think of it as an insurance policy too, Amanda, and a lot of people don't like talking about it like that. But the only reason why they don't like referring to it as that is because there is a possibility that you won't get a baby from the egg. So you have to know that is always a possibility, but you do it so that you hopefully will, you hopefully will be able to use them in the future or just, have that relief of, you know, not having that pressure of, the biological clock. So that's just an important thing to know that it's possible that those eggs won't produce, a healthy live baby too, because of that attrition rate. But it's
So
true.
we're getting
Like,
close to where,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go
I
ahead. Go
just,
ahead. Sorry.
okay,
You're
so I was
right.
just
You're
gonna say
good.
we're getting close to opening this up for Q&A, but so I want to ask one parting question first, which is to say, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's on the fence about whether or not to go through this process of egg freezing, what would you want them to walk away with from what we've talked about tonight? And Alex, let's start with you.
I think we've talked a lot about like relationships being one of the reasons why like and dating and like the stress of it, which is so true. Like I agree with Valerie. Once I froze my eggs, I think I started dating more intentionally, even like not looking for someone to be like a dad, but to be like my partner, which I think is really important. It takes the stress out of it. But I mean, I'm 40 now, and I have a lot of friends who have had other stuff happen. I have friends who've had cancer who wish they had frozen their eggs. I've had friends who decided to, I mean, they've had partners since they were 25 and just decided to have kids now and can't. I think there's so many scenarios where you feel safe, and I think it's for everybody. I think like the biggest piece of advice I would say is it's not just for someone who's single and doesn't have a partner. I think it's for everybody. Everybody should think about this because you don't know what your life is going to look like. 10 years from now. And I mean, I had a friend of mine who froze her eggs when she was 26, so long ago, because she was in fertility. She was a fertility nurse, had a baby naturally at 30, and then wanted to have another, and they had to use her eggs. And so, like, that was the perfect scenario of like
Mm-hmm.
what we've been talking about, right? Is like she wanted to have a second baby, and that was how she did it. So I think there's so many scenarios when like we've really focused on one, which I think is most of our experiences here, but it's not, it's for everything. So my recommendation would be to look at it no matter what situation you are in life, even if you're in a happy relationship, even if you are engaged, if you are married, I would look at it. That's my biggest advice.
Yeah, that's such an important piece that we also didn't touch on, the cancer patients and the patients that just are end up being older in long-term
Yeah.
relationships. That's so true. I would, just to piggyback on that, I personally, froze my eggs 6 times, got married at 38, met my husband at 36, got married at 38, had a child at 39 naturally, a child at 40 naturally, both girls, and my 3 normal embryos I have frozen are males. So I tied my tubes, and if I want to have a third child, it will be hopefully a boy, if one of those 3 embryos works. So that's, another like similar to your friend situation,
Mhm.
for sure. And hopefully, you can still get pregnant naturally. And
Yep.
so anyways, but yeah, I said the parting piece of advice is get tested, have a consult to talk about your numbers, just to be educated, and you don't have to do anything, but just get tested and talk about this with your friends.
And I'm going to piggyback on what Valerie just said. It's don't be afraid to talk about it. I think my parting advice is this is becoming more and more mainstream. Talk about it. Talk about it to your friends. Talk about it in chat. In something like what Jewish Fertility Foundation. What we hope to offer within the foundation is right now we offer these buddies that will offer help with fertility, but we're looking at potentially offering that for young girls looking at egg freezing too, and having someone that they can feel comfortable going to, who they know is doing this. So just utilize resources. Don't be afraid to utilize your resources, and empower yourselves. Just go out there and say, I am doing this for me, and that's the most important thing.
Well, I appreciate it. And I, as I said, I wish I could turn back the clock, although my adopted daughter is wonderful. But it was a second child situation for me. I mean, I got pregnant, successful pregnancy very easily. And and then, stuff happens and I wasn't as fertile. And the whole point is, even menopause, it's not like you're fertile one day and you're not fertile the next. Menopause is a process, and there is a time, right? There's time to squeeze something out if you know what's going on.
Yeah.
And the only way to know what's going on is to be tested, really. So, Rebecca, I want to turn it over to you now and have you look at the chat and see if there's some questions that you'd like to pose that have been posed by our attendees.
Yeah, there are some great questions. The first one I have is what advice do you have for those who are interested in freezing their eggs but who are scared of needles?
Okay, I'll start. So yes, it is so I'm scared of needles. Okay. I'm the biggest wimp, and most doctors are when it comes to being patients. But okay, so the needle that you use for these injections is like the tip of a lead pencil. So very, very small. When you think about a needle, you're thinking about getting the IV, you're thinking about those big needles that no, it is not like that. Those diabetics that have to prick themselves every day in their fingers, it's like that size of a needle. So it's not a huge needle. And technically you squeeze your fat in your belly as tight as you can, and you just squeeze it so hard that you can hardly feel the injection. And then you can also hire, if you want to pay extra, you can hire someone to come and inject for you. There are services, I'm sure, in every state. But it's not as scary as it sounds. Like the needle is super, 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 super tiny. It's like the tip of a lead pencil going into your belly. Like it's not the same. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, it's so easy. I think it barely registered on a registration scale. I think the only one that freaked me out was the one you have to put in your, and everyone's different too. So like
That
some,
one is a little bit more intimidating.
yeah, the one that you put in like your hind quarter area, I was like, wait, how am I gonna get back there? That feels like, what if I'm in the wrong area? But I mean, it's a big, also not everyone has to do that one, so don't freak out. Um,
Yeah.
some people do. It was like what medication too, I think is different for everybody. So, but I was,
And
yeah, it's,
sometimes friends or partners
yes, friends or partner.
love that part of it.
Yes.
To
Exactly.
just
I know a friend who had another friend come over every day, and it was like nice for her too to like have someone to come and hang out with her. So, like she could not look at it and do it herself. So yeah, like friends. It's really easy to do once you do it, and then you're doing it so often that you get used to it.
I just do want to put in a plug on JFF's website for each city that we're in. We have a list of like fertility related services, including concierge services with nurses that will come to your house and help you with injections if that is something you decide you want to do. And you can always contact us if you don't see resources in your area, and we can help you find them.
I did not know that was a thing. That's really cool.
Yeah,
Mhm.
as that is a thing. So if
Yeah.
that is something that will help you get through the process, we have resources for you. Um, What, what are so you went through some of these potential risks. What's the percentage of patients you've seen who get bad side effects from the medications?
So, I mean, it depends on what thing we're talking about, but I would say if I had to give you a percentage, it would be 1%, honestly, 1%. Um, and even that, like, usually the side effect would be like ovarian hyperstimulation, and we can manage that. I've never had someone with a side effect we couldn't manage, you know. But most people, I don't hear from, like, they don't have complaints, they they may have complaints, but they don't talk about it with, like, not so serious where they need to see a doctor or talk about it with a doctor.
Okay. And is there an age cutoff, like a maximum age you would say that someone should be freezing their eggs?
I mean, that's a really hard question. I think we will let you freeze your eggs in my clinic until you're 46. But after the age of like 42, the chance of those eggs really being, helpful is not very high. So you just need to be educated on that. But if that's going to help you feel better going into dating and everything, then, by all means, do that. But I do like to talk to people about, obviously, about their chance of success, using those eggs based on their age and stuff. So, in general, I've frozen 43, 44-year-old eggs, before. And we just talk about, the fact that, these eggs are not as good quality as if you were, 33 and 34. And so we just have to know, and we're probably not going to get as many eggs, but if you really want to do this, absolutely, let's do it.
That's really helpful. And then Alex, I know you touched on this and you said that the nurses in the clinic were really flexible and willing to work with your schedule, but like the question is, were you able to continue working? Were you able to continue with your daily life during ultrasounds? It's just difficult to leave work daily. Like what is the day-to-day,
Yeah.
um, you know,
You
time
can
required?
definitely work through this. I mean, I don't think it's any different than feeling like it's almost like you have a bad period. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like you're more emotional, it's heightened awareness, like you feel discomfort. So, and like I said, my nurses, um, at my clinic, they had really like the open hours were like 4 a.m. Like you could come in before work to do your blood work. I went during lunch, and they did after work too. So they were open, I think, until 9 or something. So I know also you get like assigned a certain nurse at this clinic, and like you could text them too if you needed help with stuff. So they were great at helping through the whole process.
Thanks. Um, all right. Our next question is, do women with certain common reproductive conditions such as PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or endometriosis have any different expectations or needs when it comes to egg freezing or anything associated with fertility preservation?
Yes. So PCOS patients, typically do extremely well with egg freezing. They will get lots and lots of eggs. But they are at a little higher risk of the hyperstimulation syndrome. So we will do a lot of things to prevent that. We know that going into your cycle. We'll start on low doses. You'll probably start with birth control pills for a couple of weeks prior to your injections. And we would just watch you very closely and give you specific medicines that decrease your risk. Endometriosis, the egg, so, it depends on if you have what's called an endometrioma, which is a cyst on your ovary that is a part of, some women that have endometriosis have that. And those, we want to make sure that technically we, do not injure and puncture an endometrioma during the egg retrieval. And if we do, we give you antibiotics. The other thing is we see that sometimes the eggs from women that have endometriosis are slightly lower quality. So you might want more eggs if you have endometriosis, slightly more than if you didn't have it, just because they might not produce as many good embryos, or we call them like blastocysts, which are day, 5 embryos, as much as other embryos eggs would produce. So just things to know, and your doctor will talk to you about, that stuff.
Thank you. Um, does anyone else want to add to that? And then, Valerie, I think this question is for you as well. Can you explain what a good FSH level would be, and does it vary depending on the time of the month that you're tested?
Yes, you definitely want your FSH level to be tested. This is the only thing that you need to be tested pretty much at a certain time in the month. So you want it to be on day 3, day 2 or 3 after your period full flow starts. And you want to get the FSH tested at the same time as you want to do what's called day 3 labs. So it can be done on day 2 or 3, and it's your estrogen and your FSH are the two most important things. So estrogen, if it's high, can falsely lower your FSH level. So you do not want your estrogen to be high the day that you check your FSH. So we will check your FSH and your estrogen that same day. And early in your cycle, day 2 or 3, it should be low, like under 80, your estrogen. And FSH level gets higher as you get closer to menopause. Anything greater than 10 starts to get concerning, and greater than 20 is typically seen in menopause. So in general, we'd like you to have it under 10. But if you have 12 or 14 or 15, we'll absolutely still do egg freezing. It's just something that we might alter your medications a little bit to try to lower your FSH level going into your cycle. And that's a temporary thing. It's not like a permanent lowering of your FSH. But yeah. Yeah,
I
it's
I
just
just do want to add, and again, I come, there's obviously the clinician and how they feel as far as that. I come from the other side where, I look at resources. So I always say to patients, really take control over your resources and recognize whether this is something that you can afford to do and whether it's worth you doing it. So, some people have unlimited resources and being able to freeze their eggs where the success rate is going to be far lower is an option. But for somebody who is over 40 and has limited resources and the success rate is not going to be that great, that would be something that I think you really want to sit down with your physician and talk to them about, because whilst it's a fantastic option, you do have to be realistic. And, if you're in your early mid 40s, are the chances, I mean, the age cutoff for using your eggs is 51. So, are you even going to, you know, have the opportunity to use those eggs within that time period as well. So I did see a question a little bit further down that somebody had asked about being, 46 and making that decision. And that's something kind of tagging onto what Dr. Libby just said is you do have to be cognizant of what your resources are and making sure that it makes financial sense for you to be able to do that. You don't want to go and bankrupt yourself with a very low success rate of being able to move forward with the process.
yeah. And if you're 46, the best option for your resources would be to consider using an egg donor. So a young woman's eggs in her 20s, who's basically gone through the whole process of egg freezing, but she's donated those eggs. So an egg donor is a really good option for 46. You have to, get there. It's a big, mental transition into thinking and being okay with that. But it is an excellent option. Your chances are extremely high. So it's a way better way of using your resources.
Let me
With
ask a
still having the
question.
opportunity, sorry, Sherry, just to add to that, with having the opportunity of being able to carry your child, fertilizing potentially with your partner's sperm, and still having that benefit, of if it is important for you to be able to grow that baby, and you have a good uterus to be able to do something like that. So, adding that to it.
And there's also donor embryos too. If you're single and 46, you can use or if you don't want to use your partner's sperm or the sperm isn't good, you can acquire an embryo that's been donated from a couple that had extra embryos. Do that at our office. At our clinic. I'm not sure if all clinics across the country have a donor embryo program, but it's also an option for you. Sorry.
So speaking of all over the country, I think we've got some listeners from all over the country. So talk a little bit about the success rate from one fertility clinic to another. One of the questions that somebody asked is, if the success rate doesn't seem that high in the clinic that's near me, is it worth it to go out of state? So talk a little bit about like different clinics and how you judge them from that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I
And you're
think
biased, but talk about
I am very biased. I think you should all fly to Atlanta. I'm just kidding. But I think that, it is important to, like Alex said, shop around, go where you're comfortable, but also really important to look at the success rates. So there's a couple of different ways. You can go on SART.org, or it's like this website that is a national registry of all the IVF clinics that have decided to enroll in SART. And those that are good clinics will enroll in SART. And so they'll publish their data on that. And then there's also the CDC registry as well. But I would say SART is like really, if you only want to go one place, just go to SART, and you can compare clinics in your area. And I think yes, if you happen to live in the middle of nowhere with no really good fertility clinics, absolutely travel, and get a hotel room close to the clinic. But there is something that you could do remote monitoring where you stay where you live and you do ultrasounds and blood work if you have a good enough place where you can get ultrasounds and blood work done, and then they'll fax over your results to the clinic that you're using, and then you fly there just for your egg retrieval. So there's ways around it, but I definitely think if there's slight differences, convenience is important, and so going somewhere close to you. But I think making sure they have like, close to the average success rate for, egg freezing and stuff like that is important. What do you guys
I
think?
think, yeah, I mean, I think it's also important to recognize how many egg freezing cycles the clinic has done. So, it's one thing having done IVF, but it's another thing looking at how many actual egg freezing cycles has the clinic done. So that's one thing that I think is important for you to recognize when you're kind of doing shopping around. The other is, we had patients would travel because of the financial program. So patients really liked the idea of being able to have this Assure plan offered to them. So, it was definitely cost effective to be able to move to wherever it was for those 2 weeks and get everything done and at least have the ability to do this money back, this Assure program, as opposed to going locally where, it was more expensive and probably not as good a chance of success down the road.
And then you can, like if you live in another state, you can, once you're ready to use your eggs, if you wanted to ship your eggs to where you're living, you can do that. People ship eggs, embryos, sperm, all over the country. So, that's something you can do later on. But I agree. Yeah, I have lots of patients that come just for our financial packages too.
You're on mute, Rebecca.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you. We have just a few more questions. All right. So someone is asking about having a balanced translocation that they just found out about incidentally, and if there are specific considerations that they might need to have when undergoing fertility preservation.
That's a great question, and it's something that probably nobody really knows what that means. So basically, we have chromosomes in all of our cells of our body. We have these, that makes up our DNA, and sometimes they can be in the wrong order, and we're normal and healthy and everything, but we can have them rearranged. That can increase your risk. You're normal and healthy, but it increases your risk of having miscarriages um, significantly. So, it basically, it's something that a lot of patients that come to me for with two or more miscarriages will check their chromosomes and make sure they don't have a balance rearrangement. If they do have that, IVF is the best option for them because we can actually check that the embryos that they create do not have any rearrangements in their chromosomes. So we can, make sure that they, also have, embryos that are balanced and have the right number of chromosomes and if you want in the right order as well. So there's like a lot of advantages to doing IVF if you know you have a balanced rearrangement. So if she knows if she is single or not trying to get pregnant right now, having a balanced arrangement, she should definitely freeze eggs because most likely she'll want to do IVF in the future to decrease her chance of miscarriages. And so, she could try on her own and go through a few miscarriages if she was open to that, if she was just knowing that risk. But she may need her embryos in the future. So doing egg freezing now is a great option for her because we can do specific testing for structural rearrangements called PGT testing for structural rearrangements that will specifically look for that. So yes.
All
Um,
right.
Rebecca, I want to, because
Yeah.
I know we're about to wrap up, and I want you to answer. I want them to answer the question about birth control before testing.
Mhm.
So before that, I want to ask, are there resources that we have online at JFF about costs related to the various mechanisms for thawing and either IVF or what's the word, just natural implantation or whatever? Um, or is that something cost-wise that we need to cover on this call?
We have some information online about the cost of the rest of the cycle, essentially the thawing, fertilization, and frozen and embryo transfer. So that's something that we can assist with learning. offline, and we'll be sending out some resources after
Okay,
this
so the
webinar.
specific question then was, should I stop taking birth control before testing? And how does that apply to
And does it
the
affect your
testing
AMH and
discretion?
other fertility markers?
If you're on chronic birth control, like you've been on it for like more than a year, then yes, it can lower your AMH slightly, um, temporarily, just for the testing purposes. So if you get off of birth control for like 3 months, you can have a little bit more accurate AMH level. But if you are on birth control and you need to be on it because, like, for whatever reason you're on birth control, and we check your AMH and it is 2. Okay. AMH, by the way, gets lower as you get older. Anything less than 1 is concerning. Less than 0.1 is in menopause, typically. So if we check your AMH and it is 2 and you're on birth control, if you get off birth control, maybe it will go up to like 2.5. It's not gonna go up to 6. So like it will still give us a general idea. If we check your AMH and you're on birth control and it's like zero point 0.1 and you get off, then you might want to get off birth control and see if it goes up to like 0.5, because that's when it really, but if it's like 4 and you're on birth control, it's just going to be even better. And 4 is a great number, like 2 is a great number. So I would say, if you don't, just maybe if you really don't want to get off of it, just check it on it and then recheck it if it's, something that you're concerned about, off birth control for 3 months.
Okay. I think, let me just see if there's any. No, I think that we've covered most of the questions. Does anyone have any closing thing that they'd like to say or make sure that everyone knows? So I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you, Valerie, Sherry, Alex, Amanda. We appreciate your time, appreciate all of your knowledge and information that you're here to share. We will be sending out both a recording and a resource document to all of the attendees tomorrow. Please email me with any questions you have for the panelists after this, and I will try to get you additional responses. And I want to again thank Jewish Women's Fund of Atlanta for sponsoring this fantastic evening. And I encourage you to come visit us at jewishfertilityfoundation.org for more information about taking charge of your fertility. Thank you all